So I'm going to hand it over to Barry, who's going to be hosting our webinar today. So Barry, if you want to
Right.
introduce the workshop to everyone.
Yes, thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. Good evening. My name is Barry Lindler. I teach at Dutch Fork High School here in Irmo, South Carolina. We're enjoying some great weather finally. They promised that it's going to turn cold again next week, but we're going to enjoy it while it's here. I've taught computer science for 23, 24 years. I've been in education for 25 years. Ran across Joe in some, I think, Facebook, I think is where we originally crossed paths in some summer workshops. And I read some posts he had and some others about coding rooms, kind of fell in love with the platform. And then we just had, as things grew, just decided we'd hold some sessions that might help some AP teachers, as well as show off the features of coding rooms and why I've chosen that for our school. And we've been very happy with that choice. Joe, I think I gave you a link to coding rooms, to the live classroom.
Absolutely. I'll throw that in the chat for you.
Okay. And I'm going to do this a little differently. I'm going to treat this kind of like I do my class. I teach by immersion, so I just kind of throw everybody in and we kind of help you figure out how to swim, so to speak. So we're going to like jump right into live classroom, just like I would with my students, and let you explore around. We'll talk to you about what you're seeing and show you how I use it to review, searching, and sorting, and some other features there. And as you're welcome just to watch and not participate, or you're welcome to actually go into the link that Joe is sharing with you, and it will put you into coding rooms. When you follow that link, it's going to ask you to, you can just sign in as a guest, and it will either choose a random name for you, or what I'd prefer if you would just give me your first name or something like that, so I have a better visual of who you are in that live classroom. So I'll give you a minute or two to pop in there if you would like. And you should be able to see on my screen, you can see some of you coming in, and some of you put in your name. Some of you are using the randomly generated names. Those are fine. So what you're seeing right away is the thing that just gave me the aha moment about coding rooms, is that in this virtual and hybrid environment that we've all been in the last year, and having to do either Zoom or Google Classroom, or Google Meet, anything like that, plus sharing a coding screen, just got extremely cumbersome. And because I would be teaching coding on sharing a screen like you're seeing now, I would lose track of my students at home. My district was on hybrid for a long time, so we had a few days in person and most days out. And those days at home, well, you know how it was. You'd lose 10% of the students, and you couldn't tell if they were there. Then when you would switch over to try to check on them, all of a sudden you'd be broadcasting the group of students, and it just got to be annoying. So this is one of the things I really liked about coding rooms, is that I could see all their participants in the side. A couple of things I want you to notice as well, as you look down these lines, you can see when these students were last active. So it gives you a quick visual of what they are doing on their end. They can raise their hand, which is a new feature now, so you can do that to get my attention. And then what I normally do in this situation, now that we're kind of back, the only people I have are people that have chosen virtual, I'll go ahead and reduce this tab and get it out of the way. A word of caution about what you're seeing on the screen is normally my students aren't allowed to do what you've been given the rights to, but you're able to actually go into my screen and make edits. You can scroll independently and look at things, and copy and paste. And what I normally do this, in fact, this assignment I've actually done with my class after they've been exposed to it and they understand that I can see what they're doing in the code. So if you want to scroll around or click in there, I think you'll see, or should see, I should see you popping up in the presentation.
Yeah, we have some people playing around, which is great.
Yeah. Now, and just to help us out, if you wouldn't delete anything that's going to break the code, that'd be awesome. But you can see how it allows students that get a little bit behind to scroll around. So when we're teaching in that small window, they're able to scroll up and down and see what they've missed. You also have to be a little mindful, like if some of you have already scrolled to the bottom, if I was trying to teach something new, the answers are down there, depending on what I wrote. Now, a couple of things across the top I want you to notice as well is your screen has presentation and then your workspace. If you click on what's called My Workspace for you, that's your own private workspace. And I say private with quotes, but that's where you work. So what I normally do is I present from the presentation screen, and students, again, can't normally do what you're doing now, but they can work live in their workspace, or they can click in the next tab over, which is presentation and My Workspace together, so you can see them side by side. And again, that's another one of the big advantages of coding rooms that I like. It allows them to work a little bit independently, allows me to kind of pace the class, but it gives them a little bit of freedom to work ahead or back up if they need to, and just something that gives you a little more monitoring power over the students themselves. Now, if you look on my screen again, the instructor has student workspaces. Now I can see all of you, and I can see you live, and now I can go into your workspaces and edit. I can run your code. I can see exactly where you are. So the way I normally do it with my class is if they have a question, they'll either raise their hand or put a message in the chat, or I use this actually in my live face-to-face classroom, and the students actually prefer it. They'll just let me know they're having an issue. I'll pop into their workspace, and I actually do a slightly different view. It makes it a little bit wider. And then I can go right to their workspace, and we can interact and see what's going on. What that also allows us to do, and Ben, I'm sorry, and just pulling yours up without your permission, but hey, that's the way it goes. What I like to do is debugging exercises with my class. And so with students' permission, if they have a problem, I'll show it up on the screen, and then we'll solve it together. And it's a much more powerful tool than I realized. I mean, I've always demoed debugging. I've always had students come up and do it, but it's just something about doing it live in their workspace and them not having to come up and stop that, and me being able to instantaneously switch between students that's really made all the difference. Now, I'm going to go back to the presentation side and show you a couple of other things that's going on in here. Over on the left is a file tab. And what I've done is, in this particular live assignment, I've got a couple of things going on. I've got me a README that kind of tells me what they're going to do as far as the exercise. I've got a main file that we're going to be in, and then a main2. I know it's a bad name, but I just chose it. And they can come and go as they want to. Now, another neat feature of the fact that we're in a shared space at this moment is you can actually create files in my workspace. And again, this is not a normal setup. This is with students I've taught before. They've been using coding rooms for a while. And this is an exercise we did about maybe a week and a half ago, somewhere around the end of Unit 7, if those of you that are AP teachers. And so I trusted them to be, doing what they're supposed to do. And we did what I'm going to show you tonight. So what I did, actually, let me see if you've got any questions about what you see so far before we talk a little bit about Java. If you have any questions, you're welcome just to unmute and say it out, or you are welcome to put it in chat. Joe is monitoring the chat for us because my brain can't, after the pandemic, my brain can barely do one thing at a time, much less two.
One of the things I'll emphasize is that right now with the shared presentation workspace, that's a setting that you can turn on or off before you open the meeting. So you can actually turn that off to make it so students can't edit that space, and it's just a presentation for them to view. So if some of you are worried about that, that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. The majority of the time, they do not have editing ability in my presentation. It's just this particular review type exercise, and you'll see why in a minute. I think you'll understand why I gave them editing ability. I found out when we switched as we were switching from virtual to hybrid to full face-to-face, even as long as I've been teaching, I didn't think about, or I guess it's just kind of slipped my mind, that students are still shy like we are. And even coming up to my computer, just like most of yours probably broadcast to the room, so my students would come up and do some work. but they still were reluctant to do that. But by using coding rooms live in the actual classroom, in the face-to-face environment, they're much more willing for me to share their screen or to interact with us from their seat and not have to come up to the front of the room. And so that's actually, it was one of Joe's webinars, I think a week or so ago, or 2 weeks ago, where he had mentioned what we're going to do tonight. This is that kind of code programming, and this worked really, really well for us. So what I've done for this one, we had already, in my Java class, we'd already studied sorting and searching, and we were just trying to start our review for the big unit test. And so what I did is I gave them this particular assignment. Now, and they knew that to run these files, they can click on the little chevron up there and choose which file to run. Or if you're going to be running the same file over and over consistently, there's a little settings tab over on the left, and you can tell it what default file you'd like to run. And then once we know which one we're working on, in fact, we'll be in main for a while, I'll just close that file window so it gets out of the way, right? So I'm going to run main. Well, I thought I'd run main. All right, give me just one sec.
Barry, I would actually reset this instance. I think it was from someone else running it. It kind of messed up on your screen.
Yes, sir. Here we go. Now we're getting our little indicators down at the bottom. All right. Thank you. And since we are running in a virtual desktop, that's an important tool to note that, and I had to keep reminding students that even though you're running it in this browser, the computer, quote unquote, is actually running someplace else. And sometimes you just lose that connection. You have to remake it. So what I did in this assignment, I just gave them some basic input, 2 different arrays, an array of numbers, an array of letters, printed them out. And then I ran some samples. I did a binary search looking for the number 17, printed it out, then did a linear search looking for the number 17, printed out that index as well. Then did a binary search using strings looking for the letter E, printed out that index, and then did a linear search for strings using the letters collection again, looking for E, and printed out that index. And some of you already knew instantly that it's not going to work right because it's not sorted. Linear would be fine, but the binary search certainly will not work. And so I just gave them some real quick output. I don't hold my students' hands a lot. Like I don't really what we call prettify the output. I let them do that. Just give them this basic shell. And what they were supposed to do then is start exploring it. So what I have found out is as they're starting to look through this, what some of them will do is start answering some questions and start interacting with this, usually in their workspace. And then as we decide to come back together, they'll bring their solutions and I'll let them just put their solutions directly into my presentation so that everybody sees it. And if it works and it's some information they want, they can use that. So for example, in this one, I did give them the full code. And my intent was that they would go through and study it. And again, remember, my students had already seen this. We'd already done a few exercises in it. So they were familiar with it. It was just to remind them. And then what I've asked them to do is complete the binary search looking for strings. And so, yes, they can certainly use this other one as a model, which is what I want them to do, to understand that the algorithm is the same. The only thing you really need to worry about is the collection itself and what data types you're working with. Now, I had been originally given in the directions in a Google Doc or in Google Classroom or things like that. But now what I've started doing is just putting it in a README text like this. And then they can just go through it one by one. So I've just reminded them up here what I've given them. And I've actually written a customized print list so they don't have to worry about the fact that these primitives aren't going to print correctly. It gives all the little brackets and things like that. And then I gave them some additional directions. I want them to execute main, tell me why it's not working, what's failing, and then figure out, are they missing something that's already there that they can use to just start exploring? And then I go a little bit further and ask them to rewrite an insertion sort and a selection sort using strings. So that's what I thought we'd get one of you to help me with now. So now that we see a working selection sort and an insertion sort, we'll see if anybody will volunteer to write either one of those, but for strings instead of ints. And sorry, I'm a country boy, so I've got dogs running all over the house. You'll probably hear a rooster in a little bit. That's just how it is. That's how my house goes. So is anybody willing to give it a shot?
I think Ben raised his hand.
Yeah, I know I knew someone would find me. I'll give it a try. I'm just making a copy of the integer sort, and I'm just going to try and do it for a string. So
okay. And will you tell us what line of code? Are you going to do it in mine?
93 has as I'm trying to change it.
Okay. And you're working in my presentation, right? Not your workspace?
No, I'm in my workspace. Is that all right?
Sure. And who are you again?
Ben Smith.
Okay. I see you. Now, if I click on this tab, it'll take me directly to his, and I can get those out of the way. And you said you were down on 92. Okay. If you don't mind, we're just going to watch you.
Oh, good.
Good. And we'll make fun of you whether you get it right or not. So don't worry about it. Okay.
Now, can I just use the same method signature and change the data type? Or do I need to make a new method?
That's a good question. And this is why I like this type of activity, because now we will have that discussion as a class. And anybody have any idea? Does he need to change that signature? Does he need to change that title? What does he need to do?
A couple of people are saying leave it.
Okay, yeah, leave it.
And everyone can feel free to unmute when Barry's interacting.
Yeah, absolutely. If you got something, you're welcome to unmute and just speak out. So it sounds like they're saying you don't have to change.
That's all I need to do. And then if I selection sort letters and print list for letters. I'm back at the top now, just testing it.
Okay.
And I run it on main. Oh.
Good.
Old line 102. Okay.
Yep. And see all the discussions this is allowing us to have in the classroom. And just what Ben did really has helped me work with individual students. I'm teaching them to constantly talk to me in line numbers, especially when I go over to their Chromebook or whatever, and they say, it's broken. They give me a line number and they get into the habit of it. And they've just learned to tell us where they are so we know to follow along. So we can go down to 102 and help them with it. And if anybody sees anything that can give them a suggestion.
I'm waiting for someone to tell me because I don't know.
One of the great things too, I would say, is if Ben was using the presentation, everyone could follow along without looking at the Zoom video feed. You could look right in coding rooms and see it, and students can do that. But the other students can be trying a solution of their own in their own workspace. So the other students are kind of thinking and brainstorming also during these kind of activities, which is really great. Right. Barry, in the chat, Josh is saying, need to use compare to.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, because we're comparing strings and strings don't have that inequality. Doesn't really know what less than or greater than is.
And it would be greater than? Or just
I-
compare to?
I don't, and this is just my style. I say I don't know all the time.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
know
know. I don't know how compare to works.
it returns the, yeah, so whichever one's greater would be comparing one to the other. Greater would be farther in the alphabet. Therefore, a positive number.
And we got a couple people, and so the chat, we have people saying less than 0, and someone else said equals 0.
Interesting. Now, what I tell my students about compare to is to remember the executor, the guy in front. If you think about them as just integers, it's like the first integer compared to a second integer. And if the first integer is smaller, then
It's
think about
earlier
it as,
in the alphabet.
yeah, and just think about that as subtraction. So if you want the first guy to come first, your answer is going to be below 0, just like you're reading left to right. And by this choice, what I've also emphasized with my students by using minimum and things like that, that kind of reminds you minimum, the guy in front is less than 0, and that helps us. And it looks like it moved our error further down. Okay.
Yeah, now we're at 107 with the swap.
Absolutely. And this is, I don't know how y'all talk about swaps, but I use 2 concepts, and you don't have to necessarily look at my camera or anything, but I use index cards all the time to demo this. And I tell them, if I'm trying to swap this, I've got to have an extra hand. You know, it's a 3-way swap, and there's just not an extra hand. And actually at my classroom, I have a fake hand, and I bring it up, put it under my arm, and stick the card in it. So I've got to take this one and put it somewhere, move this one over, then this one's got to pick it up. So they just learn. So some people call it extra hand swap, some people call it 3-way swap. So that's what this guy is doing. And then what kind of error did you get there?
String cannot be converted to int.
Okay, so you can't grab this index card and put it in a container that's expecting an orange, right? Good. And then in here, I also remind my students that this thing lines up diagonally. Some of them remember it as A equals B, B equals C, C equals A. That's that same pattern. Okay, now you ran it, and is that the results you were expecting?
Yeah, well, my string array is now sorted.
Okay.
And then
All
I
right.
guess if I want to, then I could run the binary search on letters, which I did.
Yes, sir. You sure could. And then at this point, we would ask, so we had a lot of conversations about this one function. So what I would do is I tell some of them they're ready to go ahead and start working on the next one. And some of them are not yet comfortable. They still don't want to work on their own, even though, you know, the assessment's coming up the next day. So then we would do another one of these together. And I'd ask somebody else to kind of work in the main presentation. And like Joe said, I generally would not have allowed Ben to stay in his own, because I really want them not to have to just stare at the screen. I want them to see it side by side. But in this case, it worked out just fine.
So you would have had me jump into yours to demonstrate for the group what I would do and talk about it as I went through it.
Absolutely. And by this time, I would have also talked to the group. They are used to me telling them don't destroy code. So if they are in my presentation or doing something like that, they would comment some things out to make sure they didn't delete a whole bunch of stuff we needed. Some of what I call my big brains, they would just automatically make a backup of the file. They'll do all kinds of things to make sure they don't knock us dead in the water. And it's just something that's worked out for me. And I've noticed, especially with some of my really shy students, that they are much more willing to contribute in this environment. It's literally sitting in the same classroom, but if it's me on a big screen, they won't say anything. But if it's us doing this, they will jump in, they'll raise their hand, they'll want to start typing. They won't come up to my computer. But because of this environment and everybody going through, and then they're looking at somebody like Ben and say, well, well, Ben makes good on tests, and wait, he got stumped, so it's okay for me to be stumped. So it just gives them some reassurance, and they hear those side conversations like we just had about the extra hand. Even though they know it, they might not have understood again why that's happening. So the fact that we're having that conversation really helps. What y'all have also noticed too is what's happening in my classroom is that my bigger brains are actually moving forward. You know, they're okay with this. They now have the ability to scroll through some working code. They're already looking at the next part of the assignment. They're already starting to work. They're setting up things. They're thinking, I'm going to be the next one demoing. And so it really does, I hate to use the word transformative, but it really is transformative for my classroom. I didn't really think, I told Sasha several weeks ago that in a way I was kind of arrogant because I'd taught so long. I thought, oh, I'm doing it right. It can't get any better. You know, the fact that they're with me just makes it awesome. And that's not true. And this has just really changed. My class was missing something. And this is that piece that is pulling out those wallflowers, those people that are just riding other people's willingness to speak out. Lots of times my class is relatively quiet now, but they're interacting here and in the chat. Another thing that I like to use this for is there's I'm sure it's a feature, but because I'm in this README file and it's live, I can put in links to files. Like if somebody said, hey, I'm not really sure about how binary search works, well, I can just go in here and paste that. And then now you can open that directly from there. And so that helps me. They don't have all the resources ahead of time, but I have a list of resources over on my side, so I can just feed that to them one by one. What I've done with this assignment is just slowly scaffold up the intensity. And so I know where my students are going to have some trouble. And I'm kind of preparing for the fact that we need to spend a little more time on binary search with array lists. We need to spend a little more time on selection sort with array list. And so I'm kind of prepping for that. One of the other things I've done with sorting and searching, and I don't know if you've noticed it, but I'm careful with my numbers and letters. Some of these concepts are confusing enough, and you know, if you've read AP questions, they get confusing. I don't try to trick them with the data itself. They have enough to worry about with the algorithms. So I do some simple things like traditionally when we talk about integer arrays, we all use single digit numbers. Well, when students are talking about index numbers and the value at that index is also a number, it gets confusing to them. So I've gotten in the habit of using double digit numbers. It just makes it a little bit easier when we had that conversation. There's just not that confusion of, was that index 6 or the actual 6? And with the letters, I don't skip around. I mean, these are all the letters in order. So their brain can quickly see if it's sorting. They're not actually having to stop to review the alphabet. You know, they can focus on the algorithm itself and see it going. The other thing, the reason I gave them that little print list pretty-fy function is some of them, as they're exploring it, will figure out they can use this print feature inside these algorithms to see what's happening as it's doing it, to watch the collection change. Now, I could have just given them that, but it's much more powerful for them to discover it on their own, or because we're in coding rooms and they're seeing me helping somebody else. If Ben had gotten stuck, that would have been my next trick, is to say, well, we need to see what's happening with your data, and they would pick up on it. And now they'll start using that same tool as opposed to me just giving it to them in the curriculum. That was a whole bunch of theory. I did not mean that to be a little theory explanation, but that's how it turned out. All right, any questions so far?
Yeah, so you've got obviously several levels of this assignment, right? I think if you look at the README, there's about four levels. Obviously, you're going to have some that can race along and finish the 4 in the hour and a half, whatever your period is, and then you're going to have some where they barely got through 2. So do you just what do you do as far as grading? Do you just give them to the end of the week and say, okay, You get to the end of the week to turn in all of that, or do you just cut it off?
Yes, sir. That's a good question. And Joe, you tell me if I start getting on my soapbox too much. I'm one of those people that I'm very careful with numerical grades. I don't feel like I'm an accurate enough grader or test writer to hold students down to a 1/10 of a point or 4 points off because something is late. I'm also a coach, so I understand the value of practice. And I talk to them about homework and classwork is practice. And as long as you are ready and fit and ready to go for the game or the big assessment, I'm okay if 6 of you finish it today and 4 of you need a few more days, and some of you don't have it ready till maybe review day before the assessment. So I'm very flexible in that. And the way I teach is kind of open workshop, lab type environment. So they hate it, but I don't accept anything that doesn't work. So they're forced to continue. Now their reward is they're going to get 100. So the grades will be high, but now they're forced to do the work because you just can't give it to me as partial. I tell them they don't want to download software that doesn't work. So this has to work, and they know if it works, they can test it. So they fight me a little bit. So I'm very flexible with that. And what I would label this is, instead of HW for homework or CW for classwork, this is an HCW. So it's something we're going to be working on for a day or two. You might finish it today. You might need to work on it for homework, but it's all this type of stuff. Everything is due for me, what we call review day before an assessment, which is the last full class day before a test. So if it takes them more time, it just takes them more time. And what you're about to see, another thing with coding rooms that they quickly figure out, is they can make their own live classrooms privately. A student can create or invite up to 5 people in there. And so they figure that out. They also know that it's easy to cheat that way. But when they've got to come back to class and demo to me, I really don't have that big of an issue with cheating. Do I have it? Absolutely. But we know who they are. Just like in your classroom, you know who those people are that are going to cheat their way through it. And then when you do the assessment, it's going to show up. So they actually go together and they enjoy working together in their own little live classroom. I also stole this tip from Joe. So if you get a chance, go to the Coding Rooms YouTube channel and watch his tips and tricks video on coding rooms. But another thing I have happening in here is I also make 2 other live classrooms, and I provide the links to the students. So what I would do while I'm teaching this is I would go into the README, and I would go down here to the bottom, and I'd paste those 2 links. And they know what that is. That's a live classroom I set up, and it's currently running. And if I've got 3 or 4 that need to go work on something together and they want to work live in a presentation, but not mine, then I'll tell them, okay, you 2, you 3, y'all go to room number 1. Y'all go to room number 2. And depending on what the assignment is, I'll know if I need more than that, or if I only need 1. And sometimes I just create them on the fly. And so I have that room ready for them. It looks just like what we're in, but then they don't have the weight of the rest of the class on it. In those particular classrooms, we have video conferencing turned on. I turned it off for this particular one, but we normally could see your faces and your screens over on the side. But when the students go to their own, I turn that feature on for them because they seem to kind of enjoy that. They even, like I said, it's weird. They're in the same classroom, but they're pair programming from across the room. And then they're talking into the screens. And in all my classes, I have 4 or 5 virtual students anyway. So they enjoy that. It kind of makes them feel a little professional. So I have that feature available for them as well. One other thing I wanted to show you or tell you about with coding rooms. This is, again, what we call a live classroom. Now, there's a drawback to a live classroom is that when you exit it, that data is gone. This is just like a lecture on a whiteboard, and everybody has their own little whiteboard. And when the class is over, those whiteboards are erased. So they need to do something about their data. They either need to download it or copy and paste it into their own private workspace that they can make, which is just their folder of files, or in an assignment. So I do also create assignments for them, and I think I have one to show you what it looks like. Oh, actually, that's a sample of the conferencing that's available in those other rooms for the students. This is what an assignment looks like. And if any of you are CS Awesome teachers, you're probably familiar with this FRQ, the gizmo from Unit 7. So what I can do in an assignment is I can give them the directions and give them all the code. I can, this one I don't think has any images, but I can put tables in it. So all I did is I just copied the FRQ from CS Awesome. I can go into assign and say which class I want to have it and when it's due. I can give them a template, which is some of the files like y'all had when we first started up. These are things I wanted them to have when it started. I can even go in and put a model solution, which I don't think I did in this situation. Yeah, I did not. And then if I want to, I can do unit testing. And so this one I did do unit testing. And so when they are done with their assignment, they can submit it and it kind of pre-grades it for them. Now those submissions are saved for them. And then you can see the auto scoring. We can go in and look at this particular student. He submitted it 15 times to get to 100%. But if it's classwork and that's what he did, that's what he did. Normally this student down here that does 23, that would really freak me out. But I know the situation that student's in. And I'm happy he's persistent enough to submit it 23 times. So their assignments are different. This is saved just like if you were doing anything else online. It's saved in their area. And then I can go into it and I can actually open up their program. And that's what the directions look like for them. And then if you see that little button there I just clicked, I can actually run through their file and see what they did when they did it. So it shows me how much time they spent on this particular question. So this girl, she started at 8:27. And if I was actually on the right file, we could actually see where she was. I think she was here, there. And we can actually watch her type. So it also helps. This situation, they were copying and pasting, so hers was kind of quick. But it makes it really nice. It's really easy to catch them if they're just stealing answers from someplace else. So that's what I use a majority of the time are actually individual assignments. We would start off in live classroom and talk and discuss. Then it would have a specific assignment to turn in. What we did today was what we just did for a review day.
One of the things, Barry, if you don't mind me interrupting, a couple of people had a question about students' work saving in the live classroom. And it does save in the live classroom. Barry, can you click the exit button quick just so I can show off something?
Absolutely. So up here in the right, I'm going to click exit and it's going to give me some choices. And Joe, you want to take it from there?
Yeah. So if you click leave, or if you just close out of the browser tab, your students' work will stay there in the live classroom for them to be able to go back in and review. And I often do that because the live classroom serves as almost like their notebook, where all their notes for the lesson we went over exist. So I always recommend they go back to the live classroom, review what we did when they're working on an assignment, a challenge. As long as you leave, you click leave, or you just close out of the tab and just leave it, it will do that. However, if you select finish, it will lock everyone out, bump everyone out of the live classroom if they had it open currently, and students won't be able to access it until you reopen it or you give them a new live classroom and stuff like that. So that's really good for Barry. I know you've used the live classroom for assessments, like timed assessments, and finishing the live classroom is really good for that. I don't know if you want to talk about that specifically, Barry, but the students' work does save and students can access it after the live session as long as you leave it open for them.
Absolutely, and he's exactly right. What I like about the live classroom is I can see 18 students at once instantly. So if I'm monitoring for a test, not so much for cheating, but just kind of see where they are and see what they're struggling with, I can see more of that in live classroom. In the assignment view, I can only see them one at a time and I have to kind of click into it. So what I've done with FRQs, like you just saw where that that girl's copied and pasted. She had to do the work originally in a live classroom. So that's why when you looked at her assignment history, it looked like she pasted the answer in. But while she was in live classroom, that's just so I can see all of them. And if you have that one student that just needs you to remind them about a semicolon so they can move on, it just lets you just pop in and take care of it. And then I finish and that locks them out. So then I can go back and assess it. And then today's assignment, when we did this, students even asked me or reminded me to make sure I did not finish it because they wanted to go back into what we were just doing. So they were working on it at home, working in that live classroom because I did not finish it like Joe said. So I didn't exit out of it and take them out of it. You can do somewhat the same thing with an assignment. So if we flip back on the assignment tab, and when I assign it to the class, and there's a publish link. So as long as it's published, they can edit it. But if it's something that I don't want them to touch after a certain time, I just unpublish it and they don't see it. And I can go into it. And then what I can do, if I don't want them running any kind of unit tests beforehand, I can unpublish it. Then I can go into their submissions. And then I can actually now write my unit tests and run them myself because I can run their code on my own. I can just pull it up. I can do whatever I want. I can resubmit. I can go in and see this particular student's grade submissions and how long it took him to get it fixed. In fact, if you look at it, it took him a day to get that one done, which is pretty cool that it took that long. But so it gives you a lot of options. My courses, I just set those up, whatever your sections are or whatever works best for you. And then I've learned that when I create a section, like of APCSA, I just have one section, but I've made a tester section. That's just for me, so that I can do some things in it. When I go into a tester or I go into an assignment, I can open up my own personal submission. And then I can put some answers in here if I want to, so that I have like another runnable answer key. And you can see this one, I ran it 46 times because I was having trouble with the auto grader for me. But it lets me just kind of cheat and do some extra little things in here. I've also done that in the live classroom. In the live classroom, even though I'm the instructor, I also have my own workspace, and that's just for me. And y'all are seeing it because I'm sharing my screen. But in here, you'll notice I've got some additional files. I've got solutions. So if I get stuck in class, I've got solutions right here with me. Y'all don't see it in your workspaces, but again, you're seeing it because I'm presenting my whole screen. But normally you would just be seeing my presentation tab. And then my workspace tab is private just for me. So I have solutions and all in here. So if I get stuck or get confused, which happens quite a bit, it gives me a way out. And I believe, Sasha, we are going to talk, did the sharing stuff change today?
Today, no, shouldn't have.
Okay, all right. I just thought it used to say something different, but this is now.
Might be like the difference between workspaces, courses, and live classrooms.
Okay.
Just they all have some slightly different sharing options. So
Okay.
One thing to note is that by default, our teacher plan doesn't enable TAs. So if you need TAs, reach out to us and we'll add that to your account.
Great. I didn't think I would use the chat feature as much as I have, but it's actually really popular. We have, just like y'all are using it in Zoom, we have some students that that's what they prefer. That's what they're used to. And I might be in the minority here for APCSA teachers, but that's one of the reasons I chose the digital format for my students' exams. They're just so much more comfortable digitally, that the disadvantage of the multiple choice questions not being able to go back and forth, I think outweighs the advantages of typing in what they've been typing in for years.
Barry, we have someone asking about, you gave a little preview of the picture lab. And so one of the things I absolutely love in coding rooms is that for an online environment, graphics support is first class. It works extremely well, and I don't believe there's another online IDE that it works as well as it does in coding rooms. So I don't know if you want to show that off.
Sure. I think this is the right one. Yep. I believe I had I think I had this working. Yep. Yes, there we go. Okay. I'm going to show you a bigger view. I altered the picture lab. I took out a whole bunch of stuff. And those of you that use CS Awesome know that Beryl had a link to a stripped down replit version. I did that and did some more adjusting and just kind of got to what I needed them to study. So this works really well. And what you saw me open down here at the bottom is the virtual desktop. And what the students do, some of them like the little small one down here, or you can actually do a link here and open up in a whole new tab. And it gives you full screen. And this is a full virtual desktop. You have access to files and things like that on here directly from what you were doing in coding rooms. And then you can just switch back and forth. Another neat thing about this feature is this is actually a live link. So this link can be shared with others. So sometimes what I'll do in class is if I want them to see something graphical, I'll give them that link and they're watching that. So I don't have to keep switching back and forth with my tab. They can switch when they want to see that. But the graphic support is really nice, especially the fact that we can put in photos. We were doing, I think I can show you today. We were in my 3rd and 4th year class. So, and they were doing Minesweeper today, and they found something that was just a reminder for them. And so they just they're not using the graphics in the program, but they wanted to remember the colors and the number pattern. So I would never even thought about it, but they just stuck the image right in there with the files so they'd be part of their assignment. And it's just neat just to have all that stuff in there together. All right, other questions I might can answer or Joe can answer.
So, can I just ask the question out loud?
Sure, please.
Yeah, my concern is the auto grader, and that's not necessarily specific to your application. How do you find the auto grader? Is it effective? Is it accurate? What are your experiences with that?
I guess I'm making it sound like Joe raised me, but Joe's the one that convinced me to go ahead and try it. I've never used an auto grader all these years of coding. I just never felt like it was me. But because of the simplicity of using it, especially with coding rooms, I think it has made a difference. Now, I remind my students all the time that this is just an electronic pat on the back. That's not the grade that goes in the grade book. This is just to make you feel a little better, that you're getting the results you expect. And if you're careful with those auto grading choices that you make and the feedback that you give them when something is wrong, you can use that to scaffold that education right on up. And like that student I showed you that had 23 submissions, I mean, he was reading those responses from the auto grader and he was learning. I didn't have to do that for him. 2 months earlier, he would have just taken a 10 or a 20 on that assignment and just that was it. Yeah. And the instant nature of it is just invaluable, that they can sit there and they just feel really good that that they have done what's needed to be done. I found that if I take a little extra time with the auto grader and anything that's a gotcha type, like an extreme, if I go ahead and make a special case for that, just to remind the students, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach them, I hate to use that sports metaphor again, but we're trying to get them ready for that last game. So I want them to make the mistakes in class. They don't have to make a D on the assignment to learn. They can still make an A, and that auto grader is helping them do that. So I feel bad when I don't use it. Now I've gotten such a good response out of it. Now, on the flip side, we do have some other students that that's the only thing they do. They just wait till that thing says 100 and they're done. But if I've written it right, I have tricked them into doing it correctly. So I hope that helps you. And that's just my personal opinion. But especially FRQs and things like that, I still go in and look at all that stuff to make sure they're not trying to manipulate it. They're just trying to give it an output it thinks it's going to want. And then the more I'm reading about it, the more extensive they are. They can be written in 10 minutes, or I can spend an hour writing some really, really intricate testing if I want to. I usually don't, usually just real quick in and out type stuff. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you. I just didn't want to penalize a student because of semicolon, but you give them an option to submit it multiple times. Then that's a follow-up question. So when do you end up grading their assignments?
Please don't laugh at me when I say this, but I tell them as long as it's there when I grade it, it's fine. And I know that's very vague. My school, I'm the director of an honors academic magnet program. So some of my students are some really bright students, and they hate that type of vague answer. But I tell them if it's due tonight at midnight and I don't grade it till Sunday, and you turn it in Saturday night, I'm fine. So I'll take it then. Now there are exceptions. If it's an assessment or if it's something that we really need to have done today, then I hold a little bit tighter to that. But I just keep going back to that same thing that I think Ben had mentioned earlier, someone had earlier, that I know the gentleman that was talking about the multiple levels that just don't all work at the same pace. And I think I'm doing my top students a disadvantage if I hold everybody back to the exact same deadline, because that means I have to average that deadline down as opposed to letting my big brains go way ahead. And then my ones that are struggling a little bit just kind of work at their own pace. So I don't have a more concrete answer to you, but I just tell them I'll make a big deal if it's actually due at midnight. Otherwise, just make sure it's there when I do the grading.
Any questions about anything else, coding rooms related, or it could be search and sorting related? Barry can go back to that assignment he kind of shared. A couple people had mentioned they wanted to download it to have it, and you can do that if you go over to the live classroom. Barry's showing it right now on the screen. You can go over the files and click the little download arrow, and it will download a zip. You can click on individual files, the 3 dots next to the individual file, to just save an individual file also. So please feel free to do that.
And if you want, if anybody wants me to, I can move my solutions over too. They're nothing spectacular, and my goodness, I hope they work. I think they work. In fact, I'll do that now while we're here. Where are my files?
So please feel free. You can unmute and ask any questions. But while Barry's moving those files over, one thing I'll mention about the auto grading is I was always a little skeptical of doing a lot of auto grading also. But I've begun, like Barry, to do it all the time, and that I feel bad when I set up an assignment that doesn't have it now. For whatever reason, I haven't looked too into it or studied it that much. There's a bit of a psychological difference in the way that Coding Rooms has the auto grading set up, I believe, because the auto grading I've done with other in other programs with students, whatever it may be, different websites that practice programming and stuff like that, I've seen the students kind of just try to like continue to click that button to like check their code, and like it's almost like they're not even thinking about the solution. They're just trying to get that auto grading right. I don't see that as much in Coding Rooms, and so that's what I kind of expected when I started. And for whatever reason, it's not that way. It may be because the button in which auto grades is a submit button, so they're thinking differently, like they're waiting until they believe the solution works and they're actually running their code and doing tests of their own before they use that. I'm not sure the psychological aspect, but I've seen tremendous results for it, and it's providing them with feedback without me having to be right there all the time. And it's extremely helpful during these times where you have from some students maybe at home working on things independently more.
Absolutely. And Joe, I appreciate that.
No, I was thinking, right, when you were saying that, it'd be a cool feature to see how many clicks have happened in the background. So, you know, if there's 10 or 20, and then maybe possibly there's some assignments you can say you can only run it 3 times or 5 times or whatever. Even if you don't have to set that limitation, it'd be nice to see how many runs are happening in the background.
Absolutely. In fact, I'll flip over and show you. Let me think of where that was that gizmo one. That one particular student that had all those submissions in this one. Yep. So when I go in and look at his and I look at his submissions, I can then, like you said, I could tell them, I mean, you can go ahead and submit all you want to. I'm going to take, nothing past 3. And so I can look and see exactly when he's submitting and what's going on. In fact, now that I look at this, I'm very curious why there are all those hundreds and then it went away. But these will let me go back and choose which grade I actually use. And you can do some filters as well. Pick certain dates. Right now, there's not I don't think, Joe, am I correct? There's not a way to limit submissions, is there? I don't know if I thought about that.
It's something that we're adding now. Yeah, we're working on that now. So that'll be there soon. But for now, students do have that unlimited submissions. We tried to make it simple so you can see, like, if someone is clearly submission hacking, you can at least see how many times they submitted.
Yeah, and Barry, I don't know if you can navigate back quick, but you can open up those individual submissions to see the autograder's feedback on each one, which sometimes can give you a kind of hint of what was going on there a little bit more. Just drag that over a tiny bit more, okay. Barry, I think. There you go.
Yep, then I can go through and read. Yep, I see now. And I do remember now, actually, this was a fault of my autograder. I remember now. Yeah, this one, that's when I figured out that little hack about if it's an actual test and I don't want them to have the autograder, I can do the autograding after they submit it. Because I was able to fine tune the test and rerun it when the student was technically already turned it in. And I just kept using his to figure it, but then I can go and see exactly which test, what the results were, whether they passed it or not, and get the input.
That's a great point, is that you can edit the autograder after the fact, and you can run the tests on student code after. So I do that sometimes when I make a mistake, or I think about some other test that I want to try. So in the future, when I do the assignment, it will be there. I can test it on the student's code. Or I never thought of it this way, and Barry, you brought up a great point. If you don't want them, if you want to auto grade, but you don't want the students to have access to the autograder for whatever reason it may be for a certain assignment, you can not have it and then add it later. You click on test bench and you add that later on, and then it will, you can do the auto grading just for yourself. You can run it on each student's code.
Absolutely. And this one looks scary, and it's not that's not nearly as scary as it looks. And there's some really nice, simple, just match the output. And Joe has some tips on his website too of how to get started with
anybody that's interested in that, I just threw the link over in the chat that shows some basic examples with auto grading that I have up on a site.
And I do want to get a plug for those of you that might be playing around with Python or Java. There's some little exercises available through coding rooms, and my students really enjoyed those, and they have some auto grading already built into them. So we can go into it. All these things have a little auto grader already. And they've written all these comparisons for us. So then I can use that to learn how to write my own. And then they just did multiple tests. and all those little assignments. They're real quick little, they're kind of like coding bat stuff, but a little more extensive. And these particular examples have neat links to Snakeify type stuff. If you haven't looked there, that's a neat website, but these are built into the directions. So if that student gets stuck, it gives them links to where they can go and get some help, but it's not the type of help. Those of you would see us awesome. Sometimes the help is really just telling you step by step what to do, which in itself is valuable. Snakeify thinks more of the theory of it. So they still then have to go back and apply it in a slightly different way. But my students really enjoyed that. All right. Is there anything else that I can either answer for you as far as sorting or searching, AP computer science stuff? Are any of y'all AP computer science readers? I don't know where my chat window went. So Joe, you'll have to let me know if there's.
Yeah, we had some people nodding, and
Okay.
a couple of people said yes.
Okay, good. I've been trying for years, and the couple of times I got offers, I couldn't get out of school. But this year, I finally got an offer. So I guess now they don't have to look at my face. It's all right.
It's not nearly as fun online as in person, though.
Oh yeah. Do you still get the swag? Do you get like bags and cups and stuff?
You get a gift. You get to pick a gift, but yeah, the experience isn't the same. But
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Last year, it was kind of weird. I'd signed up to do both, and you know how they don't let you do both. And I'd heard that they needed readers for principals. So I contacted the College Board and said, hey, I'm fine with either. Just switch me to principals. Took weeks to do that. And then when they finally said they were done, they dropped me from both. And then when I contacted them and said, no, I want to do principals, they got everything straight, which had me sign back up for A again, and A was already full. So, but we're looking forward to it. All right. Well, there's Sasha, did y'all want to talk about some upcoming things in coding rooms?
Yeah, sure. I think a couple of things that I'm excited to share is like today, I think is the first time that we ran like the entire session on the version 2 of the IDE. So if any of you guys had tried coding rooms prior to V2, there's a lot of new additions to the platform. And I think everything's a lot easier in the live classroom. Some of the performance issues that we had with V1 have all been patched. And then we're also working to add Visual Studio Code in the browser. That's already in a closed beta. So if you or your students want to use Visual Studio Code or VS Code on coding rooms, please just drop us a note and we can add you to that closed beta. We already support Jupyter Notebooks as well. So it's kind of like Google Colab. So you can set up your Jupyter Notebooks for all you Python coders. You can run that. And then we're also working on a marketplace for the courses that are created on coding rooms so that you can share your courses with other teachers and also accept donations and accept and charge for your courses as well for all the content that you create within coding rooms. So if you're interested in that, please let me know and we can start adding you to those conversations. And we have a lot of other interesting things, but I think it's kind of a nice handful. We'll also have a Java course up pretty soon with videos. So if you're interested in that, please drop us a note and we can add you as well to those discussions.
I was very surprised at the number of my students that will not leave their Chromebook. I've got a beautiful Mac lab. It's only 2 years old. And 80% of my students will not leave their Chromebook. So looking at beautiful 21-inch screen, and I got some that will immediately go to it, but yeah, I thought they'd want to use desktop IDEs, but coding room is stable enough and fast enough for them. That Minesweeper game, it gets a little bit of animation. Sometimes they think, well, it's not quite as fast, but then they figure out they can make their code more efficient, do some things better. And that's just where they live. They just live inside their Chromebook or their MacBooks, and that's what it is.
Awesome. That's really cool to hear. And also the Java and Python assignments that Barry showed, if you want those imported to your account, you can just drop us a note on the live chat to import those on our website, or you can send me an email. It's just Sasha, S-A-S-H-A, @codingrooms.com. And we'll be happy to import that for you.
Good.
Can I ask another question? I don't know if this is the time or I should wait.
Please.
Yeah. So what I like about what I'm using right now is that when the students submit their assignments, I can sort of glance at them beforehand. And if there's something that looks off, I can just add a comment right on their assignment, you know, either in the comment section or on their assignment. And I'll go, wait a minute, I think you're doing this incorrectly. And then they have enough time then to go back and fix it. Or if they have a question about the assignment, they can just put a comment to me. And so that back and forth is really helpful before they submit. I don't know if you have that capability.
There are a couple things that you can do. So you do have access to student workspaces while they're working on it. And so I do that often also. You can highlight code and add a comment. You can actually use the programming languages comment feature. So Barry, highlight some code, right click, and you can add a comment.
I can't spell, sorry.
And so then the students can see that. You can, you know, you of course use the programming languages comments, for instance, the 2 slashes there in Java. And you can also now, Sasha, I believe it's on production. There is a chat on assignment workspaces, regular student workspaces they just create, as well as you can see it in the live classroom down there at the bottom, Barry, if you can just click on the chat again. Yep. So that chat is available for you and the student to go back and forth in their assignment. Barry, I don't know if you mind going into assignment just to show
Not at all.
would be in there.
Is that what you want me to show, like here?
Yeah, exactly that. And then so because Barry's only in this, because it is his workspace, it just shows Barry, but you can still click everyone, Barry, and it will open up the chat in which you can send messages. I guess you can write notes to yourself.
And those persist, is that correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
those are persistent. And so if a student, there's kind of like 2 use cases. Like one is the async use case where you can just drop notes as feedback or set up a list of issues for like the student to fix prior to resubmitting or before they submit. And then the other way to do it is it's live. So if the student is also in the assignment working, so example, like if it's during class time and you're dropping in to help them, the chat is live, so they'll see the message pop up. And they also receive desktop notifications if they have like multiple tabs and stuff.
And this is an assessment, and I'd use that feature Joe had talked about. I just left comments to the student about why I deducted points on their FRQ and just told them what I saw was wrong. And like Joe had mentioned, if you could do that while they're working, I don't know, I think all those assignments for me were already submitted. But if some of them said, oh, here's an in progress one, so I can actually go in there and see where she currently is and give her that little help you were talking about. I could go in and hunt down what was going on, or she'd have that persistent comment. Good question. I should have gone over that. I apologize.
I saw one question about downloading CSV files. So there's no way in the front end right now, but we can help you with that. We're working to support all the different formats right now for the different types of LMS platforms. I think one of the main things, we have a lot of data that most of them don't support. So like we're trying to come up with logical summaries that you can just import directly. And generally for all these things, like since the platform is still like being actively developed as we speak, we have a 24/7 live support chat. So you can always just drop us a note, and then usually within like 12 hours, we can send over a CSV or anything that you need.
Yep, and it really is 24/7. When I first started, I was blowing that thing up really late Sunday nights, and I was getting answers. All right, is there anything else? Okay, if you have not, I would just highly encourage you to play around with coding rooms and see if it works. I know everybody is rushing to get ready for the exam, but depending on when it is, you might have some time after the exam too to try it. And also in the review environment, it might be a good time to do it. You're just using it to reinforce concepts like we did tonight.
Live classroom is perfect for review.